Phones are already recording. 3 screens glowing beneath the table like hidden landmines, all aimed at table 7. She's walking in right now, and he has no idea what's about to hit him. You really think she'll just walk out when she realizes? That's the whole point. Jenna Martinez leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that still managed to cut. Naomi Chen plays the saint at work, but wait until she sees what we set her up with. A deaf guy? She'll fold. They always do. Lucas Kim adjusted his phone angle behind a water glass, his expression smug. She'll probably do that thing where she fakes smiles, checks her phone, and suddenly her son's babysitter has an emergency. Exactly. Marco Diaz grinned. And we'll have the whole thing on video. No more Naomi's so wonderful from HR. No more acting like she's some kind of office hero just because she brought us donuts once. Jenna's eyes gleamed with anticipation. He's up for the same promotion she is. When this goes viral internally, there's no way management picks her. 3 colleagues. 1 hidden camera. A blind date engineered to prove the company's beloved office mom was as shallow as everyone else. They were certain Naomi's kindness was just good PR. They thought they'd finally expose her for the fraud she had to be. They had no idea they were about to film something that would destroy their assumptions and haunt them forever. Before we continue, tell us where in the world you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. She's late, Marco muttered, glancing at his watch. The Bistro Margot hummed with the low murmur of dinner conversation. The clink of wine glasses, the occasional burst of laughter from nearby tables. Relax, Jenna said, not looking up from her phone screen. She's probably still in her scrubs. You know Naomi, always playing the martyr with those double shifts. Think he knows? Lucas asked. That she's a broke single mom who takes the bus? Doubt it. Jenna smirked. We told him marketing consultant, late 20s, loves art. He's expecting someone impressive. And she thinks she's meeting financial analyst, early 30s, likes running. Vague enough. Marco's grin was cold. The best traps are the ones nobody sees coming. Lucas shifted uncomfortably. You really think she'll be that harsh? I mean, it's not like she's mean. Everyone has a breaking point, Jenna interrupted. Tonight, we find hers. Before we continue, tell us where in the world you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. At 7:03 p.m., Naomi Chen pushed through the restaurant doors, and the exhaustion hit her before the warmth did. 14 hours. 14 straight hours on her feet at Mount Sinai, dealing with everything from post-op patients to a man who'd somehow gotten a toy car lodged in a place toy cars should never be. Her lower back ached, her shoulders were tight, and somewhere in her bag, her phone had 6 missed calls from Micah's preschool about next week's field trip permission slip. The hostess smiled professionally. Good evening. Do you have a reservation? I'm meeting someone, actually. Blind date? His name's Alan? Of course, right this way. Naomi followed, suddenly hyper-aware of her appearance. She'd changed out of her scrubs in the hospital bathroom, thrown on the floral blouse she kept in her locker, the one that didn't scream, I spent my day handling bedpans. But her hair was barely brushed. Her mascara from this morning was probably smudged, and she was pretty sure she smelled faintly of antiseptic. Why did I agree to this? Because Stephanie from work had begged her. Because her friends kept saying she needed to get back out there. Because Micah had drawn a picture of her holding hands with a stick figure labeled New Daddy, and it broke her heart in ways she couldn't explain. The hostess led her to a table near the window, where warm pendant lights cast everything in amber. And there he was. Alan Sullivan sat upright, hands folded on the table, wearing a navy button-up that made him look like he'd actually put thought into this. Dark hair, neatly trimmed beard, kind eyes that looked nervous. Handsome, Naomi thought. Really handsome. Alan rose as Naomi approached, offering a polite smile. Then his hands moved, graceful, deliberate, a greeting she didn't understand. Naomi froze. Her brain stuttered, trying to process what she was seeing. His lips hadn't moved. His hands had. They'd formed shapes, patterns, a language she couldn't read. Heat washed across her face, followed immediately by a cold wave of panic. He's deaf. They'd set her up with a deaf man and hadn't told her. Oh my God, oh my God. She could feel the hostess hovering nearby, could sense other diners glancing over, could practically hear the universe asking what she was going to do next. From the back booth, Lucas leaned forward. Oh, this is going to be perfect. But Naomi Chen wasn't the kind of woman to crumble under pressure. She took a breath, deep, steadying, the same breath she took before stepping into a trauma room, and reached into her bag. Her fingers found her phone. She opened notes with shaking hands and began typing, her thumbs moving faster than her racing thoughts. Hi, Alan. I'm Naomi. I don't know ASL, but I'm happy to communicate however works best for you. She slid the phone across the table. Alan's eyebrows lifted, his breath caught, and then, slowly, carefully, he smiled. Really smiled. The kind of smile that transformed his whole face, erasing the nervousness and replacing it with something that looked like relief, like gratitude, like he'd been bracing for rejection and just realized he was safe. He pulled out his own phone and typed, "Thank you." Most people panic or leave. Naomi shook her head firmly, mouthing the words even as she typed, "No way." From the back booth, the whispered commentary died. Wait, Margot breathed. What is she? She's not leaving, Lucas said, confusion creeping into his voice. Jenna stared at her phone screen, the smugness draining from her expression. She's actually staying. The dinner became something none of them had planned. Naomi and Alan ordered, her, the pasta primavera, him, the grilled salmon. They communicated through a clumsy but honest back and forth of typed messages, Alan's occasional careful signing, and Naomi's focused attention as she tried to read his lips when he mouthed words. She told him about Micah, about the chaos of single motherhood, about the crayon drawing currently held to her fridge by a magnet shaped like a dinosaur. Alan's face lit up. He typed about loving kids, about volunteering at a youth center on weekends, about teaching basic signs to children who thought it was the coolest secret language ever. They laughed, her audibly, him silently, his shoulders shaking with genuine mirth. Their conversation was unconventional, slow, imperfect, and utterly real. In the back booth, the three conspirators sat in stunned silence. He's not uncomfortable, Lucas said quietly. She's not faking, Margot added, his voice strange. Jenna said nothing. She just watched, her phone still recording, as something unexpected unfolded on her screen. Then came the moment that shattered them completely. Naomi set her phone down, looked directly at Alan, and then typed one more message. Would it be okay if you taught me how to sign something? Just something small. Alan's eyes went wide. He hesitated, fingers hovering in the air, as if he wasn't sure he'd read correctly. Then slowly, he signed a simple phrase. Naomi watched with absolute focus, her brow furrowed in concentration. She lifted her hands, shaky, uncertain, and tried to mimic the movements. Alan nodded encouragement. She tried again, Slower this time, more careful. And when she finally got it right, when her hands formed the signs for "nice to meet you" with earnest, imperfect precision, Alan pressed one hand to his chest, his expression crumbling into something raw and unguarded, moved beyond words. In the back booth, Jenna's vision blurred. Lucas swallowed hard, his throat tight. Marco wiped at his cheek, shocked to find it wet. None of them had expected this. Not kindness, not effort, not humility, certainly not from Naomi, the woman they'd written off as a performative fraud. At the end of the dinner, Naomi typed one last message. "I don't know if this was supposed to go well, but I'm really glad it did." Alan's response came quickly. "Me too. Can I see you again? Maybe somewhere quieter? Somewhere we can talk more easily?" Naomi's smile, the same tired smile she'd walked in with, was now filled with warmth. "I'd really like that," she said softly, clearly. Alan read her lips, and for the first time that night, he spoke aloud. Slowly, carefully, his voice slightly modulated but unmistakably sincere. "Good." Naomi's breath caught. From the back booth, 3 phones continued recording as their owners sat paralyzed. What was supposed to be humiliation had become one of the most unexpectedly beautiful moments they'd ever witnessed. Naomi stood, waved shyly, and walked out into the cool Chicago night. Alan watched her leave with a look of pure gratitude. And in the shadows of Bistro Margot, Jenna whispered into the silence, "We're horrible people." They had set up a single mom as a joke on a blind date with a deaf man. But her compassion, her willingness to learn, her refusal to treat him as anything less than whole, those were the actions that left them in tears. And they would never forget it. What they didn't know yet was that the video they'd recorded wouldn't stay hidden. And when it surfaced, it wouldn't destroy Naomi's reputation. It would destroy theirs. Jenna Martinez didn't start out cruel. At 29, she'd clawed her way up from an entry-level position at Sterling and Hayes Tech Solutions to senior project coordinator in just 4 years. She worked weekends. She stayed late. She'd sacrificed relationships, sleep, and any semblance of work-life balance to prove she belonged in a room full of Ivy League graduates when she'd graduated from a state school in Ohio. And it still wasn't enough. 6 months ago, the VP of Operations position opened up. The kind of role that came with a corner office, actual decision-making power, and a salary that would finally let her stop sharing a cramped apartment in Wicker Park with 2 roommates. She'd been told she was a shoo-in. Then Naomi Chen's name entered the conversation. "We're impressed with Naomi's emotional intelligence and team leadership," the CEO had said during the all-hands meeting. "She has a unique ability to connect with people at every level." Emotional intelligence, connection, soft skills dressed up as qualifications. Jenna had KPIs, metrics, documented revenue growth. Naomi had what? Sympathy. The ability to remember everyone's coffee order? The resentment had started as a whisper. Then it became a hum. Then it became a roar Jenna couldn't ignore. Lucas Kim was 26 and desperate to prove himself. Fresh out of Northwestern with a degree in computer science, he'd landed at Sterling and Hayes with dreams of revolutionizing their infrastructure, of building something that mattered. Instead, he'd spent 2 years debugging code written by people who'd already been promoted past him. His manager? Alan Sullivan. And Alan was fine, competent, fair even. But he was also deaf, which meant meetings took longer, communication required extra steps, and Lucas, who prided himself on efficiency, found the accommodations exhausting. Not that he'd ever say that out loud. That would make him the bad guy. So instead, he said nothing. He smiled politely. He attended the ASL workshops HR offered, once, then never again. And he let the frustration build until it needed an outlet. When Jenna pitched the blind date setup, Lucas had hesitated for maybe 10 seconds. Then he'd thought about the promotion Alan was being considered for. A senior development role that should have gone to someone younger, hungrier, without complications. And he'd said yes. Marco Diaz was the quiet one. At 32, he'd been at Sterling and Hayes longer than any of them. 7 years, 3 of which he'd spent watching less qualified people get promoted around him. He had a wife, a mortgage in Naperville, a daughter starting kindergarten in the fall, and medical bills from his father's cancer treatment that were slowly drowning him. He needed that VP role. Not wanted, needed. But the company loved Naomi. Everyone loved Naomi. She was the one who organized the office baby showers, who remembered your mother's surgery, who somehow made a sterile corporate environment feel almost human. Marco had nothing against her personally, but he had $73,000 in debt and a daughter who deserved better than watching her father break. When Jenna suggested exposing Naomi as a fraud, Marco saw it for what it was. Survival. You did what you had to do. That's what he told himself when the guilt crept in late at night. You do what you have to do. Naomi Chen's story didn't start in a Chicago bistro. It started in a studio apartment in Atlanta, Georgia, 11 years ago, when she was 22, and so in love, she could barely breathe. His name was David. David Mitchell, charming, confident, a law student with a smile that made promises without words. They'd met at a coffee shop near Emory University, where she was finishing her nursing degree and he was studying contracts and constitutional law. 6 months later, they were engaged. 8 months after that, she was pregnant, and 9 months after that, David was gone. Not dead, just gone. The bar exam was coming up. He needed to focus. A baby wasn't part of the plan, not yet, maybe not ever. He'd left an envelope on the kitchen counter with $2,000 cash and a note that said, "I'm sorry, I'm not ready to be a father." Naomi had stared at that note for 3 hours, her hand on her growing belly, trying to understand how someone could say, "I love you" on Tuesday and disappear by Friday. She never heard from him again. Micah was born on a rainy Tuesday in March, 6 weeks premature, weighing 4 pounds and 3 ounces. The NICU nurses had called him a fighter. Naomi called him her miracle. Raising him alone had been the hardest thing she'd ever done. Harder than nursing school. Harder than working double shifts while pumping breast milk in supply closets. Harder than learning to silence the voice in her head that whispered, "You're not enough," every time Micah asked where his daddy was. But she'd done it. She'd moved to Chicago for a fresh start when Micah was 2. Found a job at Mount Sinai. Found an apartment in Logan Square that was small but safe. Found a rhythm that worked. Barely, but it worked. And she'd promised herself she'd never let bitterness win. David had abandoned them. Fine. That was his loss, his failure, his choice to miss watching their son grow into a smart, funny, impossibly kind 4-year-old who drew pictures of dinosaurs and asked questions about how clouds stayed in the sky. Naomi refused to let that betrayal turn her hard, so she showed up. She helped her coworkers. She remembered birthdays and brought soup when people were sick and listened when they needed to vent. Not because she was performing, not because she wanted something in return, but because the world had been cruel to her once, and she'd be damned if she'd pass that cruelty on. When Stephanie from HR had approached her about the blind date, Naomi's first instinct was to say no. "Come on," Stephanie had pleaded. "His name's Alan." He's a financial analyst, super nice, and honestly, I think you two would really click. Just one dinner. If it's awful, I'll buy you wine and we'll laugh about it. Naomi had looked at the photo Stephanie showed her, a kind face, a genuine smile, and thought about Micah's drawing on the fridge. Okay, she'd said quietly. One dinner. She had no idea she was walking into an ambush. Alan Sullivan's earliest memory was his mother's hands, not her voice. He'd never heard that. But her hands, moving through the air like birds in flight, forming shapes and stories and all the love a 4-year-old needed to feel safe in a world that didn't speak his language. Margaret Sullivan had been deaf from birth, just like Alan. His father, Thomas, was hearing, a patient, gentle man who'd learned ASL before their first date and never stopped learning. Alan grew up in a bilingual household, ASL with his mother, spoken English with his father, and a seamless blend of both that felt like home. His childhood in a suburb of Minneapolis had been remarkably normal. Good schools, close friends, teachers who worked with him instead of around him. He'd never felt disabled, just different, in a way that didn't matter much once people got to know him. Then came college. The University of Michigan had been a culture shock. Suddenly, he was navigating lecture halls with hundreds of students, professors who refused to wear the FM system microphones, group projects where his teammates forgot to include him in planning sessions. He'd learned to advocate for himself, learned to read lips with startling accuracy, learned to code switch between the deaf community and the hearing world with an exhausting fluidity. But he'd also learned that loneliness could exist even in crowded rooms. His last serious relationship had ended 4 years ago. Rachel, a hearing woman he'd met through mutual friends. She'd been patient at first, willing to learn signs, willing to accommodate. But eventually, the accommodations had felt like burdens to her. It's just so much work, she'd said when she ended things. I feel like I'm always translating, always adjusting. I need someone I can just talk to. Alan had nodded, signed, I understand, watched her leave, and he decided he was done trying to fit into someone else's world. When he'd moved to Chicago for the Sterling and Hayes position 3 years ago, he'd thrown himself into work. He was good at his job, exceptional even. His code was clean, his solutions elegant, his work ethic unmatched. But he'd also noticed the subtle ways colleagues excluded him, the side conversations he couldn't follow, the jokes he missed, the times people forgot to loop him into email chains or meeting notes. Lucas Kim was the worst about it. Not malicious, just careless, impatient, always rushing, always moving too fast to slow down for someone who needed accommodations. Alan had learned to brush it off, to smile politely, to pretend he didn't notice. When HR had mentioned the blind date, arranged through some coworker connection he didn't fully understand, Alan had almost said no. But his sister Emily had been on his case for months. You're 31, Alan. You can't hide behind work forever. Just try. One date. What's the worst that could happen? So he'd agreed. He'd put on his best shirt. He'd shown up early. He'd sat at that table with his heart hammering and his hands restless and a tiny, desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. What Alan didn't know was that 3 of his colleagues were sitting 20 feet away, recording every moment, waiting for him to be humiliated. What Naomi didn't know was that her simple act of kindness, of staying, of trying, of refusing to give up, was about to expose a cruelty that had been festering in the shadows of Sterling and Hayes for months. And what none of them knew was that the video Jenna, Lucas, and Margot had recorded wouldn't stay on their phones. Because Marco's hand had been shaking when he hit stop recording. and in his nervousness, he'd accidentally shared it to the company's internal Slack channel instead of saving it locally. By the time they realized the mistake, two M47 employees had already seen it, and the world Sterling and Hayes knew was about to change forever. The waiter appeared with menus, his smile professional but wary. He'd noticed Alan's signing the whole restaurant had. "Good evening, folks. Can I start you off with something to drink?" Naomi glanced at Alan, who was watching the waiter's lips intently. She reached for her phone, typed quickly, and slid it to Alan. "What would you like to drink?" Alan's response came within seconds. "Just water with lemon, please. Thank you." Naomi looked up at the waiter. "He'd like water with lemon. I'll have the same, please." The waiter nodded, clearly relieved he didn't have to navigate something more complicated. "I'll be right back." As he walked away, Alan typed another message. "You don't have to translate everything. I can write my order down." "I know," Naomi typed back, "but it's faster this way. And honestly, I don't mind." Something in Alan's expression shifted, softened, like a door opening just slightly. He signed something she didn't understand, then typed, "Most people make me feel like I'm inconveniencing them." Naomi's chest tightened. She thought about the double shifts where charge nurses sighed when she asked questions, the dismissive doctors, the patients who treated her like she was invisible. "I get that," she typed. "Different reasons, but I get it." From the back booth, Jenna leaned closer to Lucas, her voice barely audible. "They're still going. How long can this possibly last?" "Maybe she's just being polite," Lucas muttered, though his voice carried less conviction than before. "She'll find an excuse eventually." Margot said nothing. He was watching Naomi's face, the way she smiled when Alan signed something animated, the way she leaned forward like she was genuinely interested. "That's not fake," a small voice whispered in his head. He ignored it. The food arrived. Pasta primavera for Naomi, grilled salmon for Alan. They ate slowly, the conversation flowing through phone screens and occasional clumsy gestures. "Tell me about your work," Alan typed. "What's a typical shift like?" Naomi paused, fork hovering over her plate. She thought about the 12-hour nights, the chaos of the ER, the patient last week who'd coded twice before sunrise. "Exhausting," she typed honestly, "but meaningful. I help people on their worst days. Sometimes I'm the only person who remembers their name." Alan read it twice, then signed something, his hands moving with deliberate emotion. He typed, "That's beautiful. Really, not many people see their work that way." "What about you?" Naomi asked. "What's tech development like?" Alan's expression darkened slightly. "Complicated. I'm good at what I do, really good. But people assume I'm slower because communication takes extra steps. They don't realize I'm already 3 solutions ahead while they're still arguing about the problem." Naomi nodded, understanding blooming in her chest. "They underestimate you. Constantly," Alan confirmed. "Me too," Naomi typed. "Single mom, nursing assistant. People see the scrubs and think I'm just following orders. They don't know I catch medication errors. I advocate for patients. I'm the one who notices when something's wrong before the doctors do." Alan smiled, genuine, warm, and signed something that made his whole face light up. He typed, "We're both more than people see. Exactly." "This is insane," Jenna whispered, her frustration mounting. "Where's the awkward silence? The desperate excuse to leave?" Lucas shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe we should just—" "No," Jenna cut him off. "We wait. Something will crack, it has to. But nothing did. Naomi set her phone down and tried something different. She pointed to herself, then made a gesture. Awkward, uncertain. "Naomi," she said aloud, signing the letters slowly. Alan's eyebrows shot up. She tried again, more confident this time. Pointed to him, made another gesture. "Alan." He signed back. "You're learning?" "Trying," she mouthed, then typed. "Can you teach me something?" "Something simple?" Alan hesitated, his expression vulnerable. Then he signed a phrase. Slow, clear, deliberate. "Thank you," Naomi repeated aloud, trying to mimic the gesture. Her hands felt clumsy, uncoordinated. Alan shook his head gently, demonstrated again. She tried once more. This time, her movements were closer. Alan nodded approval, signing, "Better. You're a quick study." Naomi laughed, soft, surprised by her own delight. "I have a good teacher." Then she typed, "My son would love this. Micah's 4. He's obsessed with secret languages, always making up codes and hand signals with his friends at preschool." Alan's entire face transformed. His hands moved rapidly, expressively, and he typed, "I volunteer at a youth center on weekends. We teach kids basic signs. They think it's the coolest thing ever. Like they're superheroes with a secret power." "That's exactly how Micah would see it," Naomi typed, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. "Maybe sometime, if you'd be comfortable. I could teach him a few signs." Naomi stared at the message. This man, this kind, patient, unexpectedly wonderful man, was already thinking about her son, already imagining a future that included both of them. "I'd really like that," she typed. In the back booth, Margot felt something twist in his gut. He watched Alan's face, lit up with genuine joy, and Naomi's smile, soft and hopeful. This wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't the plan. "They're actually connecting," he said quietly, almost to himself. "So what?" Jenna snapped. "It's one dinner. Real life will hit eventually. This is just—" "Look at them," Lucas interrupted, his voice strange. "Really look." They did. And for the first time that night, they saw what they'd been trying so hard to deny. Two people, imperfect and tired and hopeful, choosing kindness in a world that gave them every reason not to. Jenna's phone felt suddenly heavy in her hand. "We should stop recording," Margot said. "We need the whole thing," Jenna argued, but her voice wavered. "For what?" Margot shot back. "What exactly are we trying to prove anymore?" Jenna didn't answer, because she didn't know. The dinner ended with promises. Typed plans for a second date. Alan's smile lingering as Naomi stood to leave. Her exhaustion replaced by something that looked like hope. "This was really nice," she said softly, signing "thank you" one more time. Alan signed back, then typed, "Better than nice." This was unexpected, in the best way. For me too. As Naomi walked toward the exit, she glanced back once. Alan was still watching her, his expression open and vulnerable. And in the back booth, 3 phones stopped recording simultaneously. Not because the show was over, but because none of them could stomach watching anymore. They'd set out to expose cruelty. Instead, they documented grace. And that made everything so much worse. Naomi's apartment at 11:47 p.m. was exactly what you'd expect from a single mother working double shifts. Clean but cluttered. Toys corralled into plastic bins, a refrigerator covered in Micah's artwork held up by alphabet magnets. She kicked off her shoes by the door, dropped her bag on the small kitchen table, and immediately checked her phone. 3 missed calls from the babysitter. 2 texts from her mother asking about Thanksgiving plans she couldn't afford. 1 notification from her bank. Your account balance is below $200. Naomi closed her eyes, leaning against the counter. 1 dinner, she thought. 1 nice dinner. And tomorrow it's back to this. She walked quietly to Micah's room, pushing the door open just enough to see his small form curled under a dinosaur print comforter. His breathing was steady, peaceful. On his nightstand sat a framed photo, Naomi holding infant Micah, both of them exhausted but smiling. No David in the frame. There never had been. She pulled the door closed and returned to the kitchen, where a stack of bills waited. Electric, $147 overdue. Micah's preschool, $320 due Friday. Groceries. She'd have to make the $80 in her checking account stretch until next Wednesday's paycheck. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Hey Naomi, it's Stephanie. Hope the date went okay. Just FYI, I didn't set this up alone. Some other people at the office were involved. Thought you should know. Sorry if that's weird. Naomi read the message 3 times. Some other people. Her stomach dropped. She scrolled back through her texts with Stephanie, looking for clues she'd missed. There, 2 weeks ago. Trust me, this'll be good for you. You deserve something nice. And earlier, just show up. Don't overthink it. Something nice. Or something calculated. Naomi set the phone down, her hands trembling slightly. Had the whole thing been staged? Was she part of some office joke she didn't understand? But then she thought about Alan's smile. The way his hands moved with such careful expression. The genuine warmth in his eyes when she'd mentioned Micah. That hadn't been fake. Whatever game someone else was playing, Alan wasn't part of it. She was sure of that. Naomi took a breath, steadying herself. Dignity, she decided. No matter what happens, I'll handle this with dignity. She typed a response to Stephanie. Thanks for telling me. The date was actually really wonderful. I'm seeing him again. Then she turned off her phone and went to bed. Across town, Alan sat alone in his Lincoln Park apartment. The space quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional car passing on the street below. He'd always liked the silence. It was never truly silent for him. Just a different kind of sound, a vibration he felt rather than heard. But tonight, the quiet felt heavier. His phone sat on the coffee table, the group chat from work still open. He'd been added 6 months ago, Sterling and Hayes' dev team, but he rarely participated. Most conversations moved too fast for him to follow, and by the time he typed a response, they'd moved on. Tonight's messages made his chest tight. Lucas, anyone see Sullivan at Bistro Margot tonight? Looked cozy. Random coworker. Wait, Alan was on a date? How'd that go? Another. Bet it was awkward LOL. Alan closed the app. He walked to his bookshelf, where a small wooden box sat between programming textbooks and a framed photo of his parents. Inside, a pressed flower from his last date with Rachel, 4 years ago. He'd kept it not out of nostalgia, but as a reminder. It's just so much work, she'd said. He'd believed her, had internalized it, had decided that maybe he was too much work for someone to love. But tonight, Naomi had made it look easy. Not effortless. Nothing about their communication had been effortless. But easy in the sense that she'd chosen it without hesitation. She'd chosen him. Alan set the box back on the shelf and returned to his phone. Opened his messages, typed carefully. Thank you for tonight. I haven't felt that seen in a long time. He hit send before he could second-guess himself. 3 minutes later, Naomi's response appeared. Thank you for being so patient with me. I can't wait to see you again. Alan pressed his phone to his chest, smiling in the darkness of his apartment. And for the first time in 4 years, he let himself hope. The video went viral internally by 9:47 a.m. Monday, Marco had meant to save it to his camera roll. Instead, hands shaking, nerves frayed from 3 hours of sleep, he'd accidentally posted it to the company Slack channel, Sterling Social. By the time he realized his mistake, 143 people had already watched it. By 10 a.m., that number was 247. The video showed everything. The back booth whispers, Naomi's arrival, Alan's signing, the dinner unfolding with awkward grace. But what viewers noticed most was the audio from the hidden phones. Jenna's cruel commentary, Lucas's snide predictions, Marco's cold calculations. And then, impossibly, Naomi learning to sign. Alan's genuine smile. 2 people connecting despite the trap laid for them. The company's Slack exploded. Sarah from marketing. This is absolutely disgusting. Who thought this was okay? Dev team lead. I want names. Now. HR director. Everyone involved. My office. Immediately. Naomi saw the video during her lunch break at Mount Sinai. A coworker showed her, sympathetic, horrified, unsure how to broach the subject. I think you need to see this. Naomi watched in silence, her sandwich forgotten on the table. She saw herself walking into Bistro Margot, exhausted and hopeful. Heard strangers betting on her failure. Watched herself choose kindness anyway. Her hands trembled. Not from shame, she'd done nothing wrong. But from the violation of it, the calculated cruelty, the realization that she'd been performing for an audience she never knew existed. She thought about Alan. Had he known? Her phone buzzed. I just saw the video. I had no idea. I'm so sorry. Relief flooded through her. He hadn't known. Of course he hadn't. She typed back, me neither. Are you okay? I don't know. You? No, Naomi admitted, but I will be. By Monday afternoon, Sterling and Hayes was in crisis mode. Jenna, Lucas, and Marco sat in HR Director Patricia Chen's office, their faces pale. Explain, Patricia said, her voice cold enough to freeze. Jenna started to speak, some prepared excuse about team building, about not meaning harm. But Patricia cut her off. Save it. I've watched the video. I've read the Slack reactions. What you did wasn't just unprofessional. It was cruel, calculated, and potentially discriminatory under the ADA. We didn't mean, Lucas began. You recorded 2 employees on a personal date without their consent, with the explicit intention of humiliating them based on disability status. Do you understand the legal exposure you've created for this company? Silence. You're each suspended without pay pending a full investigation. Security will escort you out. Consider yourselves lucky if this ends with suspension. That evening, Naomi met Alan at a quiet park bench along the Chicago River, away from restaurants and cameras and eyes that judged. He signed as soon as he saw her. I'm sorry. You have nothing to apologize for, Naomi said, typing simultaneously. Neither of us did anything wrong, but you were humiliated. Because of me. No, Naomi typed firmly. Because of them, not you. Never you. Alan's shoulders sagged with relief. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the water reflect the city lights. I thought about canceling tonight, Alan admitted. I thought maybe you'd want distance from all of this. I thought about that too, Naomi typed. But then I realized they wanted us to fail, to prove we couldn't connect. Staying away would mean they won. Alan turned to look at her directly, his expression intense. So what do we do? Naomi smiled, tired but genuine. We keep going. We prove them wrong just by being ourselves. Alan reached for her hand. She took it. And somewhere in the city, the video continued spreading. Not as the joke it was meant to be, but as proof that dignity and kindness could triumph over cruelty. The prank had backfired spectacularly, and Naomi and Alan were just getting started. Wednesday morning, Naomi walked into Sterling and Hayes Tech Solutions for the first time since the video went viral. She'd never worked there. That had been Alan's world. But she'd been summoned by HR, asked to participate in a formal investigation, and she'd decided it was time to face the people who treated her humanity as entertainment. The receptionist looked up, startled. "Ms. Chen, I have a meeting with Patricia Chen at 10. Of course, I'll let her know you're here." Naomi sat in the waiting area, her hands folded in her lap. She wore her best blouse, not the floral one from the date, but a crisp navy one that said professional. She'd left Micah with her mother, taken a personal day from the hospital, and prepared herself for whatever came next. Alan appeared from the elevator bank, surprised. "You're here. They asked me to come. You?" "Same." He hesitated. "How are you holding up?" "Better than expected," Naomi typed. "You?" "The office has been different. People apologizing. People avoiding me. Lucas tried to explain himself yesterday. I walked away." Before Naomi could respond, Patricia emerged from a conference room. "Naomi, Alan, thank you for coming. Let's talk." Inside the conference room sat Sterling and Hayes CEO Marcus Thompson, Patricia, and a lawyer Naomi didn't recognize. Marcus spoke first, his voice measured. "I want to start by apologizing on behalf of this organization. What happened to you both was unconscionable. We failed to maintain a workplace culture that prevented this kind of behavior." Naomi nodded but said nothing. "We've suspended Jenna Martinez, Lucas Kim, and Marco Diaz pending the outcome of this investigation. Based on what we've found and the video evidence, we're prepared to terminate their employment." "What do you want from us?" Naomi asked aloud, Alan watching her lips carefully. "Your input," Patricia said. "This is your story, your experience. We want to handle this in a way that respects your wishes." Naomi glanced at Alan. He signed something. "What do you think?" She considered carefully, then typed on her phone so everyone could see. "I think consequences matter. But I also think people can change. What they did was cruel, but I don't want vengeance. I want accountability." Marcus leaned forward. "What would accountability look like to you?" "Mandatory training on disability inclusion. Public apologies, real ones, not corporate scripts. And they need to understand what they did wasn't just unprofessional, it was dehumanizing." Alan added his own message. "I want to know this won't happen to the next deaf employee or the next person anyone decides to target." "Agreed," Marcus said. "We're implementing immediate changes to our inclusion policies. And Alan, we owe you an overdue conversation about advancement. You've been overlooked too many times." That afternoon, Jenna, Lucas, and Marco were brought into separate meetings with HR. Each was given a choice: resign with severance or accept a demotion with mandatory unconscious bias training and a 6-month probationary period. Jenna chose to resign. The shame was too great, and she couldn't imagine facing Naomi or Alan again. Lucas and Marco accepted the demotion. Marco, thinking of his daughter and his crushing debt, chose accountability over pride. When Marco saw Alan in the hallway later that week, he stopped. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said carefully, making sure Alan could see his face. "But I need you to know, I see what I did. I see you, and I'm sorry." Alan studied him for a long moment, then signed. I don't forgive you yet, but I appreciate you saying it. Margot nodded, understanding that some repairs take time. Naomi and Alan met at Millennium Park that evening, the skyline glowing behind them. This has been exhausting, Naomi typed. It has, Alan agreed. But I keep thinking, if this hadn't happened, we wouldn't have met, and I wouldn't trade that for anything. Naomi smiled, the weight in her chest finally lifting. Me neither. Can I meet Micah soon? Alan asked. Officially, I mean. Not just texted stories. Actually meet him. Naomi's breath caught. Introducing Micah to someone meant something. It meant this was real, that Alan wasn't temporary. Saturday, she typed. Come over Saturday. We usually make pancakes and watch cartoons. Very glamorous. Alan's face broke into a wide smile. Perfect. Saturday morning arrived with nervous energy and the smell of burnt pancakes. Naomi stood at the stove, flipping breakfast, while Micah sat at the kitchen table. Swinging his legs and chattering about the dinosaurs he'd drawn at preschool. Mama, when's your friend coming? Soon, Bug. Remember, Alan can't hear like we can. He uses his hands to talk, so we need to make sure he can see our faces when we speak, okay? Like superheroes? Micah asked, eyes wide. Naomi laughed. Kinda like superheroes? When the doorbell rang, Micah bolted for the door. Naomi caught him just in time. Let me answer it first. She opened the door to find Alan standing there, holding a small wrapped gift and looking more nervous than she'd ever seen him. Hi, he signed. Hi, Naomi said, smiling. Come in. Micah's very excited to meet you. Alan stepped inside, and Micah immediately appeared from behind Naomi's leg, curious and fearless the way only 4-year-olds can be. Are you Alan? Micah asked. Alan knelt down to Micah's level, making himself smaller, less intimidating. He signed and pointed to himself. Yes, I'm Alan. Micah's eyes widened. Whoa, you talk with your hands. Alan smiled and signed. I do. Want me to teach you? Naomi translated, and Micah nodded enthusiastically. Alan signed slowly. Hello? Micah tried to copy the gesture, his small hands fumbling. Alan gently adjusted Micah's fingers, then gave him a thumbs up. Micah beamed. Mama, I did it. The morning unfolded with surprising ease. They ate pancakes, Micah insisting Alan try the ones with chocolate chips. Alan taught Micah basic signs. Thank you, please, dinosaur, which made Micah shriek with delight. They sat on the living room floor, building a block tower that Micah promptly destroyed with toy trucks. Naomi watched from the couch, her heart doing complicated things. This was what she'd wanted, what she'd feared she'd never have. Someone who fit into their small world without demanding it change. Someone who looked at her son with genuine affection, not obligation. Later, while Micah was absorbed in coloring, Alan sat beside Naomi on the couch. He's wonderful, Alan signed, typing the translation. You've raised an incredible kid. Thank you, Naomi typed. He doesn't have a dad. It's just been us. I always worried that wasn't enough. It's more than enough. Look at him. They both watched Micah, his tongue poking out in concentration as he colored a T-Rex bright purple. I don't want to rush things, Alan typed carefully. But I need you to know I'm all in. Not just with you, with both of you, if you'll have me. Naomi's eyes stung. She reached for his hand, squeezed it. We'll have you, she typed. Monday brought unexpected complications. Someone, Naomi suspected one of Jenna's friends, posted a snarky comment on the company's anonymous forum. Love how Chen gets to play victim while Sullivan gets promoted. Convenient timing. The comment was deleted within an hour, but not before dozens of people saw it. Naomi received a screenshot from a sympathetic coworker. Her hands shook as she read it. She could ignore it, should ignore it, probably. But she thought about Micah, about the world he'd grow up in, about what she wanted to teach him about standing up for yourself. She created a public post on her personal social media. To anyone questioning my integrity, because I chose dignity over cruelty, I don't owe you explanations. I owe my son a mother who doesn't shrink when people try to diminish her. I owe myself peace, and I owe the man I'm dating, who happens to be deaf, a partner who won't let ignorance go unchallenged. Do better. The post was shared 847 times by the end of the day. That weekend, Alan brought over sticky notes and markers. He sat with Naomi and Micah, writing ASL vocabulary words and sticking them all over the apartment. Refrigerator, door, happy, love. This is how I learned English as a kid, Alan explained through typing. Labels everywhere. It becomes part of your environment. Micah ran around the apartment, touching each note, trying to sign the words. Mama, our house talks now. Naomi laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. That night, after Micah was asleep, Naomi and Alan sat on the couch with mugs of tea. Thank you, Naomi signed, practicing. For everything. Alan signed back, thank you for letting me in. And for the first time since David had left that envelope on the counter, Naomi let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, this was how love was supposed to feel. Not perfect, not without complications, but real, and safe, and worth fighting for. The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon while Naomi was restocking supplies in the cardiac unit. Ms. Chen, this is Dr. Patel from Mount Sinai's trauma program. Do you have a moment? Naomi's stomach dropped. Calls from administration never meant anything good. Yes, I'm here. We'd like to offer you a position in our new acute care training initiative. It's a 6-month program that would certify you for higher-level trauma response. The catch is, it requires night shifts 4 days a week, and the training is intensive. Naomi's breath caught. This was the opportunity she'd been waiting for. More training meant better positions, better pay, a way out of the financial constant she'd been drowning in. What's the timeline? She asked. We'd need your answer by Friday. Training starts in 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Night shifts. 4 days a week. When would she see Micah? When would she see Alan? Can I think about it? Of course. But Naomi, opportunities like this don't come often. I'd hate to see you pass it up. That same afternoon, Alan sat in a conference room with Marcus Thompson and the Director of Development. We want to promote you to Senior Solutions Architect, Marcus said. It's overdue, and frankly, we should have done this years ago. Alan felt vindication wash through him. Finally, recognition. There's one complication, the director added. The position requires quarterly travel to our satellite offices, Boston, Austin, Seattle. A week at a time, sometimes more. Alan's elation dimmed. Travel meant time away. Away from Chicago, away from Naomi and Micah. He typed carefully. How often? 3 to 4 times a year. Maybe more depending on project needs. Alan nodded, his mind racing. This was what he'd worked toward for years. But now, for the first time, he had something, someone, worth staying for. Can I have time to consider? Take the week. But Alan, this is a significant opportunity. Don't let it slip away. That evening, Naomi and Alan met at their usual park bench, both carrying the weight of decisions that felt too big. I have something to tell you. Naomi signed, then typed. I got offered a training program. 6 months, night shifts, intensive. It's everything I've wanted professionally. That's incredible, Alan signed. But it means less time with Micah, less time with you. I don't know if I can do both. Alan nodded, understanding. Then he shared his news. I got offered a promotion, senior architect. But it requires travel, weeks away at a time. They sat in silence, the Chicago River flowing beside them. We can't both do this, Naomi typed. Why not? Alan challenged gently. Because Micah needs stability. Because relationships need time. Because... Alan interrupted with signing, then typed. Because you're used to doing everything alone. But you don't have to anymore. Naomi's eyes stung. What if we made it work? Alan continued. Your mother helps with Micah during your night shifts. I adjust my travel schedule. We plan around each other instead of against each other. That's a lot of coordination, Naomi typed. It is. But isn't that what partnerships are? Figuring out how to build lives together instead of separately? Naomi stared at the message, something loosening in her chest. She'd been alone for so long that she'd forgotten what it meant to have someone willing to plan around her, not despite her. You'd really do that? She typed. I'd really do that, Alan confirmed. Take the program. I'll take the promotion. We'll make it work. 3 weeks later, Micah's preschool held their annual spring showcase. Micah had been cast as Tree Number 3 in a production about seasons, which he took very seriously. Naomi sat in the audience, her scrubs hidden under a cardigan, exhausted from her first week of night training. Alan sat beside her, having rearranged a client meeting to be there. When Micah appeared on stage, arms raised like branches, wearing a construction paper crown of leaves, Naomi grabbed Alan's hand. Micah spotted them in the audience and waved enthusiastically, breaking character completely. The other parents laughed. The teacher gently redirected him. After the show, Micah ran to them, leaves flying. Did you see me? I was the best tree. You were amazing, Naomi said, hugging him. Alan knelt down, signing. You were perfect. Micah beamed, and then turned to the little girl beside him. This is Alan. He's my mama's boyfriend. He talks with his hands. The casual announcement, so simple, so matter-of-fact, made Naomi's throat tight. Boyfriend, she mouthed to Alan. He smiled, signing, I like the sound of that. That night, after Micah was asleep, Naomi and Alan sat on her couch, the exhaustion of their respective weeks catching up. This is hard, Naomi typed. The schedule, the coordination. I won't pretend it's not. It is hard, Alan agreed. But worth it? Naomi looked at him, this patient, kind man who'd rearranged his life to fit hers, who'd learned Micah's favorite dinosaurs and never once made her feel like a burden. Completely worth it, she typed. And when he kissed her, gentle, sure, she believed it. The email arrived on a Thursday morning, sent to the entire Sterling and Hayes staff. A subject, a public apology. To our colleagues. 6 weeks ago, we participated in something cruel and indefensible. We set up 2 people, Naomi Chen and Alan Sullivan, on a date with the intention of humiliating them. We recorded them without consent. We made bets on their failure. We treated their humanity as entertainment. We were wrong. No explanation justifies what we did, but we want to acknowledge the harm we caused and the changes we're committed to making. Lucas Kim, Marco Diaz. The email included links to disability inclusion resources, a donation receipt to the Chicago Hearing Society in Alan and Naomi's names, and a commitment to ongoing education. Jenna's apology came separately, privately, a handwritten letter delivered to Naomi's home. Naomi, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know that watching that video, seeing what I tried to destroy, changed me. You showed grace I didn't know existed. I'm sorry I was too bitter to see it in real time. I've resigned from Sterling and Hayes. I'm starting therapy. I'm trying to become someone who doesn't need to diminish others to feel worthy. Thank you for being who you are, even when we didn't deserve it. Jenna Naomi folded the letter carefully, tears pricking her eyes. She showed it to Alan that evening. Do you think they mean it? I think they're trying, Alan signed. That's more than they were doing before. Should we respond? Alan considered. Only if you want to. You don't owe them closure. Naomi thought about Micah, about the lessons she wanted to teach him about accountability and grace. She wrote back, Jenna, I appreciate your apology. Forgiveness isn't something I can offer quickly. It's a process. But I respect that you're doing the work. I hope you find peace. Naomi, 2 weeks later, the crisis Naomi had been dreading finally came. Micah spiked a fever at preschool, 104 degrees, lethargic, unresponsive to children's Tylenol. The school called Naomi at Mount Sinai, panic in the director's voice. Naomi's hands shook as she grabbed her keys. Her training supervisor stopped her. Chen, you can't just leave in the middle of... My son is sick, Naomi said, voice breaking. I have to go. She called Alan from her car, hands free, forgetting he couldn't hear phone calls. She texted instead, Micah's sick, really sick. I'm going to Children's Memorial. Can you... She didn't even finish the message before Alan responded. On my way. The emergency room at Lurie Children's Hospital was controlled chaos. Crying children, exhausted parents, the smell of antiseptic and fear. Micah lay on a gurney, small and pale, an IV in his tiny arm. The doctor suspected influenza B, possibly complicated by dehydration. We'll need to monitor him overnight, the pediatrician said. His fever should break with fluids and antivirals, but we want to be cautious. Naomi nodded, numb, holding Micah's hand. When Alan arrived, out of breath, still wearing his work badge, Naomi nearly collapsed with relief. He's going to be okay, she signed, tears streaming. But I was so scared. Alan pulled her into his arms, holding her while she finally let herself break. They stayed through the night. Naomi in the chair beside Micah's bed, Alan on the uncomfortable hospital couch, both of them keeping vigil. Around 3 a.m., Micah's fever finally broke. His eyes fluttered open, confused and groggy. Mama? I'm here, Bug. Right here. Alan too? Alan moved closer, signing, I'm here too. Micah smiled weakly, then fell back asleep. In the fluorescent hospital light, Naomi turned to Alan. You didn't have to stay. Yes, I did, Alan signed. This is what family does. Family, Naomi repeated, the words settling into her chest like a promise. If you'll have me, Alan signed. Officially, permanently. Naomi's breath caught. Are you not proposing? Not yet. But telling you, I'm in this, all of it. The emergencies, the chaos, the beautiful mess of your life. I want all of it. Naomi kissed him, tasting salt and exhaustion and hope. We'll have you, she signed back. Always. When Micah was discharged the next afternoon, they went home together. All three of them. Alan carried Micah up the stairs. Naomi unlocked the door, and they collapsed on the couch in an exhausted pile. Alan? Micah asked sleepily. Yes? Are you going to stay forever? Alan glanced at Naomi, who nodded. I'd like to, Alan signed, if that's okay with you. Okay, Micah said simply, burrowing into Alan's side. And in that moment, Naomi realized that family wasn't about perfect circumstances or ideal timing. It was about showing up, staying, choosing each other again and again, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. 6 months later, autumn arrived in Chicago with crisp air and leaves that turned the city gold. Naomi had completed her trauma certification. Alan had successfully navigated 3 business trips, FaceTiming with Naomi and Micah every night. Micah had learned 37 signs and used them to narrate his entire preschool day. They'd found their rhythm, imperfect, constantly adjusting, but theirs. On a Saturday morning in October, Alan invited Naomi and Micah to brunch at a small restaurant along the Chicago Riverwalk, the same stretch of river where he and Naomi had decided to keep going after the video went viral. Micah was ecstatic. The place with the good pancakes? The place with the good pancakes, Naomi confirmed. They arrived to find Alan waiting at a table by the window, sunlight streaming in. But there was something different about him. A nervous energy Naomi recognized. "You okay?" She signed. "Ask me in a few minutes," he signed back. They ordered food. Micah chattered about his upcoming field trip to the aquarium. Naomi sipped her coffee, watching Alan carefully. Then, after the food arrived, Alan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small box. Naomi's breath stopped. Alan turned to Micah first, signing slowly. "Micah, I need to ask you something important." Micah looked up from his pancakes, curious. "I love your mama very much. And I love you very much. I want to be part of your family forever. Is that okay with you?" Micah's eyes went wide. "Like, forever, forever?" "Forever, forever," Alan confirmed. "Will you come to my school stuff? Every time. Will you teach me more handwords? As many as you want." Micah considered this with the seriousness only a 5-year-old can muster. Then he nodded. "Okay, you can stay." Alan smiled, then turned to Naomi. He opened the box, revealing a simple silver ring with a small diamond. "Naomi Chen," he signed, his hands trembling slightly. "You've taught me what it means to be seen, to be chosen, to be enough exactly as I am. I don't want to imagine a life without you and Micah in it. Will you marry me?" Naomi's vision blurred. She looked at the ring, at Alan's hopeful face, at Micah watching with wide eyes. She thought about the woman who'd walked into Bistro Margot 7 months ago, exhausted, alone, trying. She thought about the cruelty that had brought them together and the grace that had kept them there. She thought about how the worst thing someone had tried to do to her had become the best thing that ever happened. "Yes," she said aloud, signing simultaneously. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Alan slipped the ring on her finger, and Micah cheered so loudly the entire restaurant turned to look. "Mama's getting married," he announced to nearby diners. "And Alan talks with his hands." A disability rights organization had requested permission to use clips in a training module about unconscious bias. Naomi and Alan had agreed, with one condition. They wanted to provide commentary. The final version showed the original footage, the setup, the cruelty, the grace, but ended with Naomi and Alan sitting together on their couch, Micah between them. "What happened to us was meant to be humiliating," Naomi's voiceover said. "But it taught us that dignity isn't something people can take from you. It's something you choose for yourself." "And kindness," Alan added through interpreted text, "isn't complicated. It just requires seeing people as fully human, not as challenges to overcome or obstacles to accommodate, but as people." On a Sunday afternoon in June, Naomi, Alan, and Micah sat in Millennium Park, watching tourists take photos by the bean. Micah was teaching Alan a complicated hand-clapping game he'd learned at school. "Mama, I'm hungry," Micah announced. "We just ate," Naomi laughed. "But I'm still hungry." Alan signed to Naomi. "He gets that from you." "Excuse me." Naomi signed back. Mock offended, "I feed him plenty." "What are you saying?" Micah demanded. "We're saying you're always hungry," Naomi translated. "Because I'm growing," Micah said dramatically. They bought ice cream from a vendor. Chocolate for Micah, vanilla for Naomi, strawberry for Alan. They walked along the park paths, Micah between them, holding both their hands. Just a family. Nothing extraordinary, nothing newsworthy. Just three people who'd found each other through the worst circumstances and chose, every single day, to stay. Later that night, after Micah was asleep, Naomi and Alan sat on their apartment balcony, the Chicago skyline glowing in the distance. "Do you ever think about that night?" Naomi signed. "The restaurant." "Sometimes," Alan admitted. "Do you?" "All the time. I keep wondering, what if I'd left? What if I'd believed what they wanted me to believe about myself?" "But you didn't." "No," Naomi agreed. "I didn't. And look what I would have missed." Alan pulled her close, and they sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes from truly knowing someone, from truly being known. "You know what the best part is?" Alan signed eventually. "What?" "They thought they were filming our failure. Instead, they documented the beginning of our family." Naomi smiled, tears pricking her eyes. "Best prank ever." Alan laughed, silent but joyful, his whole body shaking with it. And somewhere in Chicago, in a city of millions, three people who'd been set up to fail were busy building a life worth living. One sign at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of grace at a time. Before you go, tell us, where in the world are you reading from? Drop your city in the comments. From Chicago to London, Sydney to Toronto, New York to Lagos. Love stories like this remind us that kindness is universal. If this story moved you, share it. Someone needs to hear that dignity defeats cruelty every time. And remember, you never know when your smallest act of grace might change someone's entire world.